Welcome to Skillage Centre for Economics. Today we will be dealing with the application of indefinite and definite integrals. And as part of this, I expect you to have basic knowledge of three important things. One is obviously how to solve definite integrals. Second, the idea of what producer surplus and consumer surplus is. And third is how to solve for a quadratic equation. Now if you have these three things in mind, then I am sure that you will be able to understand today's class very well. Now in case you don't have a prior knowledge in these three aspects, I would request you to go through our classes of previous sessions. Right. Now, when we look at now you have already done what integration means. It means nothing but area under the curve, right? That's what you have studied. And when you studied indefinite integrals, that was area under the curve up till the infinity or up to the point where the equation is defined. In definite integrals, you basically looked at what the area will be up to a definite point, right? Now, if I point this out, right, let's say this is 0 to some value q. Now the area under the curve would mean nothing but all this area, right? All this area up to this point is what you will find in your definite integral. Again, when it is a case of an upward moving curve, area under the curve up to a point from 0 to q would mean all the area under it, right? This is what you have done till now. Now the other thing that you would have studied in microeconomics is the idea of producer surplus and a consumer surplus, right? Now if you take this as a demand curve, downward sloping demand curve, and this as an upward sloping supply curve, right? So producer surplus will be defined where it meets the quantity demanded, right? And this will be the area of your consumer surplus, right? And this will be your producer surplus. Now in economics, we will be using the idea of definite integrals to find out the area of consumer surplus and the area of producer surplus. Now how are we going to find this? This area you already know is your area under the curve, which we can write as, if let's say this is your demand function, right? So you can find this whole area by just doing a definite integral which goes from 0 to q, right, followed by the function with respect to the quantity itself. That's what you find, right? So you get the whole area. But now you don't need the whole area for the consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is only this kind of a triangular area that you have here, right? Now the other thing is, if this is the price, this is nothing but a rectangle, and the area of the rectangle is just length into breadth, or in this case it is nothing but your price into quantity. Now from this whole area, if you subtract this rectangular area, what you are left with is this area, which is what you want, which is your consumer surplus, right? As simple as that. But now it will be a different case when it comes to producer surplus. Now producer surplus is this area, right? Let's say this is, okay, area PAE is what your producer surplus is, and by integration you can find out the area OAEQ, right, which is nothing but your definite integration which goes from 0 to q, which is the supply function with respect to your quantity, right? But you have to subtract this area from something, and that something is your total rectangle here. If you subtract P into Q from this integrated area, or this area of definite integral, you will get this producer surplus. Right, and this will be your consumer right. This is the basic idea of it. Now usually we are not given the quantity and prices. What we are given is only a demand function and a supply function, right. In this example, in the coming example, what we will see is, if you are given just a demand function and a supply function, how are you going to find out the consumer surplus and the producer surplus? Let's have a look at the example, right. So this is what your sum is. You have been given a demand function which is 25 minus q square, and you have a supply function which is 2q plus 1, right. Now you have to determine the producer surplus and consumer surplus at equilibrium, right. So what does it mean? It basically means at a point where the demand curve and the supply curve intersects. That is the point where you have your equilibrium quantity and equilibrium prices, right. Now if you just look at this, 25 minus q square is nothing but a downward sloping curve which is not linear, okay. It starts at 25 and it is a non-linear line, right. On the other hand, you have a supply function which is 2q plus 1, which is nothing but your upward sloping curve, okay. So this is your supply function, this is your demand function, right, that's given. Now what we need to find is, what is your equilibrium quantity and what is your equilibrium price, right. For that, all you need to do is just keep it equal. So 25 minus q square equal to 2q plus 1, right, because you find equilibrium where demand and supply functions are intersecting or where they meet, right. Now if you just kind of rearrange this particular equation, what you will get is q square plus 2q minus 24 equal to 0, right. Now if you remember how to solve for equations, you will remember that you can do it by splitting the middle term, right. So what you can do is q square plus 6q minus 4q minus 24 equal to 0. You have split the middle term into 6q minus 4q. Now a little rearrangement, and what you will get is q plus 6 and q minus 4 equal to 0. So either this term is equal to 0 or this term is equal to 0. So you get two values of q. One is q equal to minus 6 and q equal to 4. Now with the basic idea or the basic logic that the quantity cannot be in negative terms, you get your q equal to 4 as the equilibrium quantity, right. So this q is nothing but 4, right. So once you got the quantity, it is very easy to find out what the price of it will be. All you have to do is plug this value either in your demand function or your supply function. I think it is easier if you plug it in your supply function. So your price is nothing but P equal to 2Q, which is 2 into 4 plus 1, right. So this becomes 9. So 9 is your price, right. Now let's find out the consumer surplus and the producer surplus, right. Now your consumer surplus, which is this area, right. Let's call this A, let's call this E, let's call this P, right. So your area APE is what your consumer surplus is. Now how do you find this? All you have to do is, you already know the area of this is nothing but your integration of this curve from 0 to Q, right. So if you take a definite integral from 0 to Q, Q is 4 here, to 4 and your supply function, sorry, your demand function is 25 minus q square, you get the whole area. But that's not what you want. You want this area. What you have to do is you have to subtract it. You have to subtract the rectangular area here. Now, when you subtract it here, what you get is 9 into 4. 9 is the price and 4 is the quantity, equilibrium quantity, right? Now, let's try to solve this. Now, what you will get is 25q minus q3 by 3 minus 9 into 4 is 36, right? Now, let's further solve this. What you will get is 25 into 4 minus 4 cube by 3, right? Now, this is 0 and you will find that this whole term will become 0. So, we will just ignore the 0 here, right? So, this is the value. Let's solve this. 100 minus 64 by 3 minus 36, right? Or this becomes 64 minus 21.3, right? If you just solve for this, what you will get is 42.7. So, that will be your consumer surplus, right? Now, once you have solved for consumer surplus, let's see if we can find out for the producer surplus as well, right? Let's have a look. Okay, let's look at the producer surplus aspect of it. Now, you will remember that producer surplus is nothing but this area minus the area under the curve, right? So, 9 into 4, which is this whole rectangular area, minus the area under the curve from 0 to q for the supply curve, right? So, that is 0 to 4 and your supply function is 2q plus 1. Right. Now, let us see what the value will be. 36 minus right. Let's solve for this. So, your producer surplus is just the value 16. Okay. Now, usually this will be in terms of money. Okay. So, it could be in rupees, it could be in dollars, it could be in euros, it could be any value, right. So, if you are not given a particular value, I would suggest that you write units at the end of it, because it will be in units. This is not a non-unit number, it is not an index number that you will not have a unit attached to it. Okay. So, either write units, or if the sum gives you the whole value in rupees, then I will request you to write, let us say, rupees 16. Okay, so this is how you actually calculate consumer surplus and producer surplus. Okay. Now, our classes at Skillage Centre for Economics will be more application based, as you would have noticed from all our classes that you have seen online, right. So, if you want to learn more about it, because all the exams, whether it is UGC NET or any entrance examinations, or if you want to just, let us say, study abroad, you will need to actually go through economics in this fashion. So, if you want to have a career in economics, and if you want to have a good career in economics, there is only one place you will get this kind of an outlook for economics in Kerala at the moment. So please join Skillage Centre for Economics. Thank you.